What's up, guys? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we have Michael here. Michael is a student and trader of mine that has joined both the Mastermind Accelerator. And today we're going to be going through Michael's journey, his strategy, exactly what he learned, and how his insights can help you also become a profitable trader. So welcome, Michael. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
That's awesome. So I just wanted to ask you very quickly, just for everyone watching this, kind of talk a little bit more about yourself, who you are, where you came from, and why you kind of got into trading.
Okay, great. So I have been trading now for about 3 years. I just finished my first year trading options. I feel like I've really learned a lot during that time, both up and down, and really just I feel like your teaching has given me a lot in terms of just strategy and direction. And the reason why I'm doing this, my fiance and I, we're going to get married later this year. We're building a house, and so there's just a lot of expenses, and she wants to stay home when we have kids, and so that's really my why is I'm trying to give her the opportunity to stay home with the kids, because that's something she's expressed she wants to do. And so it really provides a lot of motivation to kind of get this right and keep going.
That's awesome. And you mentioned earlier before this call, you already do work like full time. You have a pretty good thing going on there as well.
Yeah, so my wife and I are both, well, my fiance, we're both CPAs, or like, they call them chartered accountants, I think, in Canada.
Correct.
And so she works in private industry, and I actually work for the public and do, taxes and all that kind of stuff. So I make a good living. And then basically what I've tried to do is work around the schedule, because I'm on the East Coast in the US. So, trading hours that we use are 9:30 to 11 a.m., which is kind of right in the middle of my day. So I've actually, I'll either come into work early or stay late to work around that. So that way I can keep my income flowing while I sort of build up the trading.
Awesome. And would it be fair to kind of say that you're doing this more so not in terms of like financially, like you don't need it, but you're doing it more so you have that freedom, kind of how you mentioned with your wife as well, and so she can kind of stay at home with kids and stuff?
Yeah, yeah. And so that was really my motivation was, both of us make very good money at our jobs. I didn't really need to start trading. So for me, it's really more of a time play than a money play. So, if I can make the same amount of money but exchange it for less of my time, that's really what I'm angling at here. And so for me, it allows me to take a little bit more risk than, a lot of other people that are starting out can take.
Right. Right. Awesome. Yeah. And we've seen that before as well. I've talked a little bit about that as well, is if you do have, a full-time job, or if you have some income just coming in from business, job, whatever it may be, it makes it so much easier to trade because you don't really care about the losses as much. And that's something that you mentioned before this call as well. That's kind of helped you. Cool. So now I kind of want to get into what strategy you kind of use, and how you really got into a position where you kind of have a consistent system, and a repeatable system that can actually make you money trading.
Okay. Well, as you've taught us, the break and retest has been something that really has given me a lot of the success that I've had. Before I would try to trade reversals, and I would try to trade, breakouts, and it's sometimes they work really well, but then other times they blow up on you really quickly.
Right.
So, the break and retest has been really great, because it really allows you to just kind of wait for the trade, say, okay, if it comes here, I take the trade. If it doesn't, I don't. It provides a lot of clarity. And I feel like when I first started out, I was looking for every single trade instead of just saying, okay, this is the trade I want. I'm going to wait for this one. And if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen.
And what a lot of people ask with the break and retest, one of the main questions I get, at least for the break and retest, is how do you determine which stock to look at on a daily basis, right? Because technically a stock can break and retest anything. So how do you determine which entry levels is the best based on the break and retest, and which stock do you go into during pre-market? Do you have a way to look at, oh, I'm only focusing on this ticker, or do you just kind of go in and then look at what's doing the break and retest?
Okay. Yeah. So mine, I noticed that you and Jack, whenever you would do live trading, you guys would look at the indices as like a, sort of a reference point for whatever you were trading. And so my thought was, okay, I need to learn how the indices move. so that way I can actually rely on what I'm seeing there.
Right.
And that was kind of the reason why I started trading primarily QQQ, was just because I wanted to focus more on that and see how it moves to understand. I started trading SPY, but then I realized SPY and QQQ kind of move the same, but QQQ moves a lot more.
Right.
So then I made that switch and haven't really looked back. But I would say that's my primary watch. And then other than that, yeah, it's just kind of, every morning, kind of like you taught us how, I clear my chart, I redo my levels, and then I'm looking, starting on the higher time frame and kind of working my way down. So I'll look at the 4 hour, look at the 1 hour, like are there levels that on a higher time frame are being respected? And then, for a long time, I was actually adding in sort of smaller levels, and what I found is that a lot of times those didn't serve me as well.
Hmm.
And so because then, when you have a bunch of levels on your chart, everything looks like a trade.
Correct.
And so really kind of narrowing it down and focusing on just a few key levels was a big help for me. And then I think the next step for me was learning to trust those levels.
Hmm.
So when you get the retest, if it holds, take it and trust that it's going to work. And if it doesn't, it was just a probability thing.
Yeah, I love that you said the probability thing, because I feel like a lot of people just can't take the loss, and sometimes you have to take the loss. And so with that probability thing, obviously we'll look at your results in a second here in terms of how you've been doing, but you've been pretty consistently green. So I wanted to ask you, how many trades do you take per day, and what's your kind of rule in terms of if you lose, like what happens on that specific day?
So I have generally been trying to take 2 trades a day max, but I would say most days it's one.
Okay.
Like I think in February I took, let's see, I took 25 trades the month for the month. So that's a little over one a day.
Hmm.
And I had 5 days where I didn't take any trades at all. I would say that was not the case early on. I was looking for a trade every day. It was almost like to justify my time, I had to take a trade, but
Hmm.
that's absolutely the wrong mindset.
Hmm.
Um, and so, I think that the combination of kind of learning to draw my own levels instead, so basically learning to draw my own levels and then comparing them to yours, and over time, just watching them get closer and closer and closer. Because you're never going to trust someone else's levels as much as you trust the ones you drew.
Hmm.
But it's nice to have that confirmation that I'm seeing what you're seeing,
Hmm.
and then so that builds, and then just wait for that trade, because
Hmm.
whenever I don't, I get into trouble.
Yeah, 100%. And that's one thing I talked about a lot in the program, is the fact that a lot of people, right when they kind of first joined, they were like, Tony, my levels aren't the same as yours. They're just not the same as yours. And I'm like, guys, just give it a little bit of time. And they're like, no, they're not the same as yours today. And then like the next week, they're not the same as yours. But I was like, guys, over time, if you keep doing it every morning, like I don't know what to tell you guys. It's the only way to do it. You're just gonna have to keep doing it every morning, and they will get closer and closer and closer. And that's exactly kind of what does happen over time, right? So I think one of the main things too for the people listening to this is, some things just take experience and time, right? Like there's some things we can accelerate, but there's some things that will just take you, a little bit more experience, a little bit more time as you learn it. And even for you, for example, the journey happened pretty quickly, right? From where you kind of started to, and we'll talk about that once we kind of start sharing the screen, but it happened pretty quickly in terms of the average trader's kind of perspective. So it can happen a little bit quicker than most people think. However, it's still going to take time at the end of the day, and it's going to take that hard work, which I'm sure you put in as well, to actually sit there, back test those previous trades, look at even learn the proper ways, and get rid of some of those stubborn mindsets. For example, how you just said, right, like trying to take a trade a day just to justify it. And I get what you mean in terms of you already have a good paying job, so it's like, why are you wasting time here if you're not making money? It doesn't make
Right.
sense, right? So I get what that mindset is, but the faster you kind of realize, like, no, you can make a lot of money here, but it's not about you're not exchanging your time for money, you're just exchanging your skill for money. So it's a little bit different, right?
Right. Yeah, well, it really is, and I've heard you say this, sometimes the best trade is no trade.
Hmm.
And that is absolutely true, because you'll end up further ahead not taking that trade than taking it and losing.
Oh, 100%, 100%. And that's why for me, even, I mean, February's been, I mean, you've probably seen it. February's been a little bit slower month for me.
Mhm.
I've taken, I don't even know how many trades, but February's actually already over. I didn't even realize. But I've probably taken in February, maybe like 12 trades max in February. And so it's been definitely a slower month for me, but it's just one of those things, right? I'd rather not take a trade than take a trade, just to force the trade to be there,
Mhm.
even if it's a winner. It's still,
Right.
for me, it's just not worth it at this point. So that's cool. Now, another question I want to ask in terms of system that I get a lot, so I want to see your perspective on it, is I obviously get how do you focus on the ticker, but then I also get, right, like if I follow your system step by step by step, am I going to be profitable? I always get that question, right? So I kind of want to hear your insight on what you took from, let's say, for example, from the lessons from me, and how did you make it your own? Because I always talk about how take what I'm saying, but then you need to kind of put your own spin on it a little bit, right? To make kind of
Mhm.
curate that strategy for you specifically. We're not the same person, obviously, right? So
Right.
what did you do to help you kind of do that?
For me, I tend to be someone that, I overthink things. And so I'm throwing out every single possibility and looking for every single trade. And so for me, I feel like going through, the mastermind course and taking the lessons, like to this day, I watch drawing key levels once a month just to kind of make sure that I'm not drifting away from that.
Mm-hmm.
And, learning about how liquidity works and where your likely targets are, for me, that actually sort of brought me peace and kind of quieted my mind because I'm like, okay, for example, if on QQQ, if I know that the daily range is $5, trying on a 50 delta contract, trying to make $5 a profit is insanity.
Yeah.
That then I'm basically setting up a system for outliers, which is not a path to profitability.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, just kind of learning the theory of like behind how options work and how stocks tend to move and just where your key levels are and which ones respect technicals and which ones we don't that really allowed me to just kind of like narrow in and focus on one thing because at first it was kind of like I'm looking at I have 10 different charts up and I'm looking at all of them and I'm trying to figure out which one looks the best and which one doesn't and it just didn't work very well for me.
So you say focusing in on more so one thing kind of helped, right? So one thing at a time type of thing.
Yeah.
Now it's interesting you mentioned you watch those, kind of the key levels workshop or any workshops back again. Would you say one thing that's helped you is blocking out of the like blocking the noise out of some of the things you see on maybe socials or stuff like that, because there's always new concepts coming in, right? There's always brand new concepts every week nowadays that I'm seeing in terms of this new trading strategy, this new indicator, this whatever. Sometimes is what would you say, do you still watch those, or do you kind of, or you kind of put those on a back burner and kind of just focus in on what you've got going and try to perfect that?
I would say within the last 2 months, I've focused in. I would say prior to that, I was absolutely falling prey to jumping from strategy to strategy to strategy, even though I had already proven that the stuff that you taught me was working.
Mm-hmm.
So like for me, intraday scalping has been really, really successful for me.
Mm-hmm.
When you guys started making all this money trading Tesla around the election, I'm like, oh, I'm going to start swing trading. Disastrous. I lost almost every swing trade I took because I just, I hadn't really taken the time to perfect it, but I was taking the profits from scalping and then using it to do a swing trade and then losing it all.
Right.
And so I'm like, okay, well maybe I need to do a different time frame or maybe I need to try a different ticker and really what I needed to do is just focus in on what I'm successful at. And then once I'm confident in that, one thing at a time, then okay, maybe I try swing trades, but I'll do it with one contract. I've heard you say all the time, like when you're trying to learn a lesson, it's going to cost you money. The question is, do you want it to cost 4,000 or 40,000?
Yeah.
And so far my track record has been for some reason I want it to cost 40,000 and I need to get better at that.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, right? I feel like a lot of people's thing is they rather do the 40,000 lesson than the 4,000 lesson. And it's just because they want speed in terms of where they want to be, which is why they kind of take that other route, right? But sometimes it's just, you got to slow it down. Yes, it's going to be slower in the long term, but you're going to save a little bit more money. Whereas I feel like for you, you're kind of an outlier as well, because you did the $40,000 lesson, but you also got the lesson out of it. Whereas some people will pay the 40,000, but they won't get the final lesson out of it, and they'll just be end up with not 40,000 anymore. So I think that's one good thing about you, where you did kind of take that speed route, right? However, you learned the lesson from the speed route, which is important as well.
Right. Yeah. And I think that the one of the differences, which I didn't mention in sort of my background, is so I started trading 3 years ago. I was day trading stocks. And I kind of did the same thing as I did with options. So the first year I day traded stocks, I lost like $50,000. And then basically I realized I needed help. So then I signed up, basically I just started learning stock analysis because I'm like, I'm just blind day trading. That's basically gambling.
Right.
So then I started learning about how to read about stocks and what's undervalued and things like that. And then the second year, I actually made 100,000 trading, and then that was kind of when I discovered options. And so I'm like, okay, I've got profit to play with. I'm going to take this new risk.
Mm-hmm.
And so I ended up burning through a significant chunk of that.
Yep.
But even still, I've never gone fully negative trading or completely blown up an account, because as soon as I do, then I'm like, okay, I need to take a step back, scale down, and sort of refocus in here, which I'll show you, because I think the first 2 weeks I was trading options, I made like $20,000 in 2 weeks, which was insane.
Mm-hmm.
I lost all of that and more over the next 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, okay, I got to figure this out. Let me sign up for the mastermind. Thankfully, I got in, learned a ton, actually. And one of the things I get questions about all the time, because I started that with $700, because I'm like, this will force me to be small.
Mm-hmm.
And in the course of the month of the mastermind, I went from $717 to a little over 15,000.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's
it
insane.
was, but like people wonder how I do that. But part of it is, like you said, like I have a good job outside. So I was able to kind of play with that and say, like, okay, this is all profit. If I lose it all, it's okay. I'm willing to take the risk and kind of try to scale up, because basically every day on every trade I was taking, I was going full port, which is not how you would recommend doing it
100%.
when you're starting
100%.
up.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then like I feel like for me, March, the next month, was really, really important in proving to myself that I could do it, because it's easy to figure it out whenever you're winning 70, 80% of your trades in a month. But the thing that I was really proud of the next month was I lost 30 trades in a row.
Mm-hmm.
I only won the very last trade I took of the month.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went from 700 to 15,000. I lost 30 trades in a row, and I only lost $4,000,
Mm-hmm.
which for me, I'm like, that's a huge story of progress.
Right.
Because prior to, signing up for the mastermind, 30, I wouldn't even have made it to 30 trades. Like 5 trades would have taken me out.
Right. Right.
And so, and the further I get along, the more that I'm kind of realizing, like, I know that you've said this, but part of it is just giving it time to sink in and experience of like, you know, trading options is pretty defensive. Like it's all risk management, because it doesn't matter how much you win if you're, getting blown out of the water every time you lose.
Mm-hmm.
And, because I've only been doing this a year, I'm happy to show you, when we get into TradeZella, I still do have some big losses, and I think it would be interesting to kind of talk through those and see that I'm not perfect either.
For sure. And one question I do want to ask you is, you kind of won money, then you kind of lost money, and then you had the 1 month that was good, and then the next month you lost 30 trades. Would you say, and I know you know the answer to this, would you say with the break and retest, right? There's some months that are really, really good, right? Where your win rate's going to be super high. Your win rate might be 70, 80, 90%. But then there's some months where your win rate may be 40%, right? Maybe even 30, or for you, for example, that's probably like a 5% win rate, right? So it's like, would you say though, right? And I always tell students this myself, is one of the things is, they'll be like, I'll say overall over like a year period or something, right? I'll have like a high 50s to low 60s win rate. That, like, I'm just trying to be realistic, right?
Yeah.
And that's what my win rate is. But they're like, no, like, you're lying. And I'm like, why? They're like, it's way higher. Like, it's like you don't lose. Like, I see you winning 70, 80% of the time minimum. And I'm like, no, guys, like, it's happening in this current market. Like, wait until the market slows down. Wait until the market slows down. And then you kind of see that win rate kind of adjusting. But your risk to reward kind of keeps you afloat as well there, right? So how do you feel about that in terms of conjunction of your win rate and your risk to reward?
100%. I agree totally. So I've had, I think, 2 or 3 months where my win rate was in the 40s. And, even with that, I think one of those months was still profitable slightly.
Mm,
And then, yeah, last month, February, was, for some reason, I was really in sync with the market, and my win rate was 83.
mm-hmm.
So it's definitely sort of ups and downs. And so it's really important to just kind of learn to survive the down months.
100%. Yeah, I agree. All right, cool. So let's if you want to share your screen, we'll kind of get into your stuff a little bit more. I'll kind of just let you run us through kind of the progress you've seen and what you've seen kind of work for you. If you want to go even maybe like a little bit more back, just so we can see that progress kind of built up over time, that would be cool too.
Okay.
And then I'll just kind of let you kind of take control of this.
Yeah, I'll just basically what I'll do is I'll start back. So basically, I started trading in December, January, February took the mastermind, March took a bunch of trades, started having some like health issues, and so I actually stopped trading until July.
Okay.
So I'm just going to go back to July because that's really kind of where I started over using really small amounts.
Okay.
But this has happened shockingly fast.
Mm.
But so you can see here, like early on, so this was July. We had 557, which was a nice green month. You can see 58. Profit factor was good. Um, Average win loss for me. This has been an issue over time um, because I'm very comfortable with risk. Sometimes I will not. We're doing manual stops, so sometimes I'll just let it run a little further. And so that's something I've really been working on is trying to keep that in check, which we'll see in other months where like I made money, but that's kind of out of whack, including last month. But so you can see, you know, losses are not crazy out of line with wins, which is, overall, even though it's small dollar amounts, I feel like that's a pretty solid month. And if you can repeat that, you will consistently make some money.
Right.
And then we go to August, down month. I
Mm-hmm.
tried scaling up a little bit too fast, and so you can see here some big losers. Which a lot of these, which I know that Neto talked about it in his. A lot of these were trades where they would go green to red, and I just wasn't managing risk properly.
Right.
And then I would just kind of like let myself say, okay, well, it looks like it's going to come back because you get a wick or something like that instead of just saying I've already passed my stop loss, I need to get out.
Right.
And so that had was a recurring issue for me that I would say even still now I'm trying to work on. But you can see win loss average is way worse, profit factor is way worse. So I was red even winning 59% of my trades.
Mm-hmm.
Which is,
So would you say this is the month you realize that your risk to reward is important, even though your win rate was good? You realize, let me focus a little bit more on risk now.
yeah, and so basically what I tried to do is kind of like I would look at the month as a whole and then sort of work on one thing a
Okay.
month. Because I'm like if I try to change everything at once, I'm not really figuring out what works and what doesn't. And then it's just hard to get a read of where I'm at.
Right.
So for example, after having this month, I think I actually started the next month smaller again in terms of contracts and was just kind of focusing on like what's my real issue here. And I think that something that's very relatable to a lot of newer people is um, whenever you're new. So like you and Jack, whenever you guys teach, your levels, you're confident in them. As soon as you get that wick at your level, you're like, I'm in, going.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that takes time to develop. And so what I would do a lot of times is I would get the wick, get the hold that I'm looking for. And when I take the trade, I end up waiting one or two candles more
Mm-hmm.
and just for like extra confirmation. And as you know, on something like QQQ, that just means you could be buying like a localized top.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it immediately goes down and you kind of have to still keep your stop loss at, your level. And so you end up having this like small risk, very small reward and you have increased your stop loss. And so it just throws your risk to reward way out of whack. And I think that hesitation it causes a lot of people to lose money. Say for example on live trades, you guys are like, okay, I'm getting out break even.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they waited 2 more minutes, and so now their break even is
Right.
$1 higher than yours. And so on the exact same trade, they've lost money and you've broken even.
Exactly. Yeah, that's one thing we say all the time as well is, it's when you have a system and you trust it, you have to put your trust in it rather than waiting and hesitating because when you hesitate or wait for, maybe five more, the break and retest itself is very simple. But once you start
Right.
waiting for, 100 different confirmations, even though it's simple, you're still going to be, lost and you're going to lose a little bit more money for sure.
Yeah, and that was absolutely the case for me. Is I would be very aggressive in terms of looking for trades, and then I would be hesitant getting in them, and then I would be not quick enough to exit a trade. And so it was really trying to identify the problem at first, and then like, okay, how do I how do I work on this to actually improve it without, and we got to a period towards the end of the year where things were a lot more choppy and it was just difficult to trade on like an intraday basis,
Right.
um, up until the election. And so, but even then for me, so this month was kind of interesting because I actually did have some success in October. Um, but then what I started seeing was like the market was kind of shifting and we started talking more about swing trades. And I just didn't really understand how they worked. And so
Hmm.
if you look at a lot of my biggest trades, they're things where I was trying to swing them and it just it didn't work because I didn't understand like, okay, you need to really size down whenever you're doing a swing and start do like a very small starter,
Hmm.
and like you've done this a lot where you'll give it a lot more room to drop, and then as long as your sort of higher time thesis isn't broken, then you'll actually add as it's dropping. And
Hmm.
I would just kind of like say, this is my position size, jump in, watch it drop 80%. And then by the time it came back, I would either sell, or by the time it came back at break even, I was just so happy it broke even that I would get out and then it runs to wherever I wanted it to.
Right.
Um,
So this is where I'm looking at your profit factor here, right? So this one, it's still about 0.99, not really
right.
that too hard that we're looking for just yet, right? So what do you think here happened? Is this more so just kind of how you said it, it's because your swings are in here, that's why the profit factor is a little bit messed up?
I would say at this point, it was still a combination of swings and being hesitant on entries.
Okay.
Um, that so though the hesitation on entries has been my biggest issue, and it's I would say it's still something I'm trying to work on improving.
Okay.
Although I have gotten a lot better at recently, and that's why sort of the results have dramatically changed.
Hmm.
Because what I've come to realize is if I have faith in the levels that I've drawn and I take the entry as, which I actually heard you guys say this on a live trade where you're like, okay, I'm gonna, if I'm looking for calls for a move up, if I can get my entry below my key level, then basically any close below that is a stop out.
Hmm.
And so I've been, the last couple months I've been trying to implement that, and suddenly, things have changed quite a bit because, you know, one, I'm not really losing that much, and if I do, a lot of times I'll stop out break even.
Hmm.
And so we'll see that coming up where I have like a couple break evens, but most of them are green. And then the ones that are red, which one of them is kind of funny, I got wiped out because I was on the wrong side of a news event and just wasn't paying attention. So,
Hmm.
still lots to be learned, but then November, I would say this is when the swings really picked up.
Hmm.
Uh, and whenever I was trying them, and you can see the profit factors dropping, my average win loss was positive, but like when you look at all these big losses,
Right.
you know, so like all right, this one was QQQ. You can see I let it go way past my stop loss.
Hmm.
Uh, Same thing. Like I just basically let them. I just let them go, and
So would you say here you're still scalping well, but it's your swings that are kind of making you red if you got it was mostly swings?
yeah. So like here, Tesla. This is the first Tesla trade I ever took. You can see I lost almost $3,000.
Mm.
I was trading a zero DTE Tesla. I had no idea what I was dealing with. I had no idea what I was reading, and you know, instead of I was just trying to branch out too quickly,
Right. And this is
and
where we were talking about a little bit before the phone call. This is where you kind of realize, focusing on one system rather than jumping from, swinging to, or sorry, scalping to day trading to swinging to long-term investing. Like you got to kind of focus on one, perfect that first, and then
yeah,
focus on the other ones.
yeah, and we'll see. December and January, and even one in February, I still took a shot here and there,
Yeah.
and decided to lose focus and paid dearly for it.
Mm.
Um, so then December, you can see profit factors jumped up. My win percentage is actually lower, and so you can see like I had a couple big wins here that really were gave me some confidence, which
Mm.
then I took some risk and gave some of it back,
Right.
or a lot of it back over this week. And then I had basically my first five-figure QQQ trade. I opened it at the end of the day because basically I was waiting for, this was the point where I realized like I need to wait for my levels.
Mm.
Was because I basically I waited all day. The trade never came, and then at like 3 o'clock, it retests the level and it holds. So I'm like,
Right.
okay, this is the trade I've been waiting for. I'm just gonna buy a small. I think I bought 25 contracts, and then when the market opened the next day, the contracts were up. a little over $4 a piece. So it was
Mm.
a $10,000 win. And then I was like, okay, the market looks like it's topping. So this was my first 5-figure trade ever, this QQQ trade. And then basically I'm like, okay, Nvidia, which was another swing that I had mismanaged, by the way. I'm going to be completely transparent about that.
Right.
I kind of realized I'm like, okay, this actually looks like it's going to play how I thought it was going to play. And so I stayed in it at that point because I'm like, even if I lose, I'm still going to end the day. I think I was up the 10,000 on QQQ and I was down like 2,000 on Nvidia. So I'm like, worst case scenario, even if it goes to zero, I'm up 8,000 on the day, which is incredible.
Right.
But then obviously it runs, and then so my second 5-figure trade happened a couple hours later on the same day.
Right. And
And
those are
then
both like overnight type of trades too?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I think the Nvidia one I opened like Tuesday or Wednesday, now you can see we're like huge wins on these like short-term swings. So then I start doing them more, and then you see like loss after loss, which all, like all of these were. And I would say I still need to work on learning how to manage them,
Mhm.
because obviously when I lose them, I keep waiting for the break, and sometimes it just never happens. And so you have to have a point where you're willing to walk away,
Correct.
which I, have not always been great at.
Mhm. So now we get into 2025 here.
So now we get into 2025,
Okay.
and well, I guess let me go back to December. So even though I made a lot of mistakes, it was still a really good month, primarily because I had my two biggest trades ever on the same day.
Right.
So I mean, you can see like this day was 25,000. I ended the month up 18.
Mhm.
So I was actually negative the entire month, other than two trades.
Right.
January was really when I kind of started focusing in a little bit more, but even still, couple swing trades. Like this is 3 swing trades. So you can see Broadcom, Tesla, and Broadcom.
Right.
And like, to me, the perfect indicator that I didn't know what I was looking at was I had both calls and puts swinging.
Mhm.
Ended up getting crushed on both. And so, but then, so I go back and I actually buy SPY, because I'm like, the market looks like it's getting stuck and I think it's going to pull back.
Mhm.
So I buy SPY puts at the end of the day. I had no idea, because I think this was right around DeepSeek or one of the news drops that caused a Friday crash.
Right. Right.
So I buy that and I open, and basically the market opens and I'm up $50,000,
Mhm.
which I'm like, okay, that's a huge amount of profit. And then I basically spent the entire rest of the week playing defense, which I think was really, really healthy for me mentally,
Mhm.
because I'm like, okay, I need to protect this huge win that I've just had, because in December I had a huge win and I gave a lot of it back by taking risky plays.
Mhm.
And I think that actually really helped me going into, which again, you can see profit factor still going up. Um, February is
And these,
interesting.
I was just gonna say, these results are more results that are honestly aligned with my results as well. Like 60% win rate, around almost a 2R multiple. Like this is literally, if I was to open a mine, like it would look very similar to something like this as well. So
Right.
this is how I feel like you kind of know you're on that right track now, where you're kind of seeing like, okay, your win rate's decent, your profit
Mhm.
factor is also going up, which is good. It's mostly kind of with you, I feel like, because your scalping's good. Like if you got rid of the swing trades for the last couple months, your scalping would have honestly just made you green the whole time.
Yeah.
But so it's one of those things where it is that the swing trading, but the swing trading is also, the overnighting is also kind of giving you the profit. So as long as you can manage your risk to reward in terms of your swing trades, right, those are decent as well, at least getting up to this point.
Right. Yeah. So then, going to last month. So this was just a really good month for me. Win percentage is 82, profit factor is almost 3. But the thing that's interesting is, if you look, my average win to loss is actually below 1.
Mm-hmm.
And so this was, I want people to see this, because even still, despite all the success I've had so far, like this was a trade where I've traded Broadcom a couple times. I think I've already pulled them up. They're all disastrous losses,
Mm-hmm.
and yet I still decided to take them.
Mm-hmm.
To me, this looked like a good trade on its own, but I didn't look at QQQ for confirmation, which if I had, I would have seen QQQ was at a double top where it's been wicking off of it several days prior to that.
Right.
So I'm long at a top. Then the news dropped. This was the consumer sentiment news, which came and just caused a giant market flush. So that position, I was actually up probably $700, and 1 minute later, I was down 16 grand.
Mm-hmm.
So like that one, that one was one like that was super painful, and I feel like I did multiple things wrong there. Like I wasn't familiar with what I was trading. I sized up way too big because I was, over here I'm trading between 25 and 50 contracts based on it, but it's all QQQ intraday, which I'm super familiar
So
with.
let's actually, while you're saying this, let's open up one of these trades of like one trade that you took on QQQ or something like that. Like your average, kind of the trade that you would take on an average day. What do you believe is your average good trade that you would take?
Okay, yeah. So the sweet spot for me has been like something like this, even though it's not a huge money maker,
Mm-hmm.
like something in this range,
Okay.
where like basically however many contracts I buy, you can see I entered at $1.84, I exited at 2.98.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've found after looking through my stats is like intraday scalps where I'm in like the $1 to $1.50 of profit is where I do really, really well.
Okay.
And so what I've kind of started doing more recently is as soon as I cross that dollar per contract of profit, when I get some weakness, I'm starting to take the trade off. And it's like instead of trying to catch the whole move or, get this huge win, just kind of like hitting my sweet spot and taking the win has been really, really helpful for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so like this trade, um, if we look through like the rest of February, it's basically that same trade over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
It's just with more contracts. So you can see 152 sold at 253. Like that exact trade has been the one that's been the most consistently successful for me.
Mm-hmm.
And towards the end of the month, volatility started going up. So then what I actually started doing was I gave myself more room on the downside, and then I started trading 25 contracts instead of 50, and
Right.
then just look for bigger moves because the market was giving those.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so that's where I think TradeZella has been helpful. Is it really helps me look at like what are the trades that I'm successful at, and then just kind of focusing in on that because at this point I know the break and retest, and so it becomes about just executing well and you know doing what works for me because swinging works for some people, day trading works for some people, and so far swinging has not been my thing. I'm sure I could learn it, but
Yeah.
it's not a place to put any risk right now.
Right. And so one question that I get a lot is how do you scale in and how do you scale out of your trades? That's a question I get a lot. What have you learned in terms of the break and retest in terms of what's the best way to scale in and scale out of positions? And then I have another question following up with that based on your
Okay.
specific thing, but we'll talk about that after.
So for me, because I'm looking for these very short, you know, 10-15 minute trades, I've figured out kind of what my sweet spot is. Usually I'll just pull the trade as a whole. I would say scaling is actually something I want to work on
Okay.
because, then I can still get the profit I'm looking for, but then catch sort of that if it keeps on running, which
Right.
it's something that's worked really well for you and Jack that so far for me, when I look at my stats,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times it hasn't worked well for me. So I actually just I cut it out, but it's something I want to build back in because it obviously is a big opportunity.
Okay. So you're more of just in 50 contracts, out 50 contracts at this level.
Yeah.
And that works for you. And that works for some people's mentors back in the day. That's exactly what they did. Like they did not let the thing continue at all. They didn't want any continuation. It was just they got in, and if they got their move to high of day or whatever their key target was, they were completely out. That's it. No scale in, no scale out. It was just one and one. And honestly, their executions looked pretty good. But for me, it's one of those things, right? The reason I do it is just because, for example, if I'm trading Tesla, right, the reason I'm trading Tesla is not because Tesla's the greatest moving stock ever. It's because there's better technicals. Like even QQQ, for example, we talked about, it has better technicals than Tesla, right? But the reason I'm trading Tesla is because of that continuation, and that's why I kind of want to scale. But when you're trading something like QQQ, it's true, you don't have to focus on the scaling aspect as much because the technicals are so good on the stock itself, or the
Right.
indice itself, which is good. Now, one question I do have for you is, there's a lot of traders that start off with a small account, right? And
Mhm.
that's something you said you did, right? You turned $700 into $15,000 in 1 month, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of traders that do kind of have, let's say, $500 or $1,000, and they want to grow that account. What's the best advice you can give them in terms to grow their account and also at the same time learn, because the thing is you grew your account but you were also learning in the process. You weren't just focused on like gambling and going crazy. Like you were actually trying to learn. Yes, your risk may have been a lot for that account, but for you,
Right.
you've been taking bigger trades before then. So what's your kind of, biggest kind of lesson in terms of, or maybe one or two lessons on how to grow a small account?
Well, I think if I, so several people in the group have actually reached out to me over time and
Okay.
wondered, how I'm doing and things like that. And I actually really enjoy those conversations because it makes me reflect.
Hmm.
And I feel like if I just listened to the advice I gave other people, I'd be a lot further along.
Yeah.
So one of the things is keep your risk small. Like managing risk is 100% of the game. Because you really can only keep going and learn from your mistakes if you can survive your mistakes and keep going.
Hmm.
So a lot of the things that everyone tells you are true. Like don't take a risk that you don't risk money you can't afford to lose. Keep your losses small enough that you can just keep fighting.
Hmm.
And because the system works.
Right.
And so it's like just figuring out how to make it work for you and fine tuning your entries and your exits. If you can manage the risk along the way, then you'll get there. So for me, it was, and I would say that even within my account, so like it went from 700 to 15,000, then it went down to 10, and when it went down to 10,000, then I went back down to 5 contracts. I was like, okay, I don't want this to go to zero. So while I figure out what's going on, or what am I seeing, what am I missing in the market, let me size down so that I don't blow up this account.
Hmm.
And so I think that it's very humbling, but you've got to be honest with yourself and say like, okay, I'm just not seeing it well right now. So it would be foolish of me to keep taking full size trades until I kind of figure out what the market's doing and how to profit from it.
So your biggest lesson in order to grow an account is actually not focus on growing the account, rather focus on defending the account, and automatically it'll kind of grow itself, maybe over time, but it will grow itself.
Honestly, that for me, that has been the most consistent. That's been what worked.
Hmm.
Is I whenever I grow the account, I will take a lot more risk than other people will. But if that doesn't work, kind of scaling back and regrouping, and then kind of playing defense, is it'll keep you in the game.
Okay.
And I've heard people say that, and I think that that's true. Is you know if I think you've said like a lot of people it takes them 2 or 3 years to get to break even, and then it takes off from there.
Hmm.
So I'm like, okay, the goal needs to be priority number one needs to be make it to 3 years,
Hmm.
which means sort of playing defense even when I'm winning.
Right. And so I think that's a huge thing too, right? Because when you do get to that break even level, you kind of realize like, okay, my wins and losses are there. You've learned everything you need to about technicals. You don't need to learn more about technicals. You don't need to learn more about, which stock to trade. You kind of have that whole system going. At this point, it's more so what are you doing wrong specifically and just focusing in on that. And I think you've done a good job kind of focusing in on, you already know it's the swings. Like you get rid of the swings, for example, just scalping wise, you're doing well. But once again, if you can perfect those swings now because you are really good at scalping, now I feel like for you, now it's the time where you are getting good at scalping. You're already good at it. You're already consistent at it. We've seen for the last couple months, you have been consistent scalping too. I think you've been green every month except 1 month for like the last like 4 or 5 months, right? Like,
Yeah.
yes, you've had other ups and downs, but you've been green consistently. So I think for you, it's at the point where you can kind of look at, swing trading, but just lower size, like just lower the size
Mhm.
on the swing trading, learn the swing trading on the side, but keep your scalping your main source of your bread and butter on consistently executing. And that's what you're already doing anyways. You didn't need to hear from me. I'm sure you already knew that.
No, but I appreciate the feedback, and for me, I think one of the things that I've realized I do wrong on swings is I don't give myself enough time. Like
Mhm.
I've noticed when you guys do them, you'll give yourself 2 weeks or 3 weeks out
Right.
and then sort of size down on the contracts to get to the position size you're looking for. And then you're only trading with profits.
Right.
And I think that that's absolutely the way, like if you're looking to expand into something else to sort of build that, is yeah, you're only trading from profit. So even if you lose it all, you didn't lose anything. I mean, you lost profits, but you're not walking away poorer than you started.
100%. Hmm.
And so it's like sizing down, giving yourself time on swings. Cause, like I'd buy a swing on Wednesday with a Friday expiration. Like that's not really a swing trade.
No, yeah, you just have to give your swings a little bit more time. For example, if it's Wednesday, by the next week at least, and
Right.
then one of those things where, for example, you're up 40 grand for February, right? For you, it's like, let's say in March, maybe your full swing positions, right? Like any swing trade you take in March, maybe make it 5 grand, right? So it's like
Right.
that way you have maybe like you take one 2.5 grand trade, you take another 2.5 grand trade. You're not going to make that much money, but the point is that you're trying to see, similar to your scalping, what works the best for you, and just trying to increase that risk to reward and increase not even the win rate. The swing trades, you know, the win rate's not the biggest thing in the swing rate. It's just literally how much can you capture in terms of risk to reward. That's the most important. In your journey, how important was community, do you think? Is that something that played a factor for you, or are you someone that liked to be a little bit more individual? Because I see you, for example, typing in the channel all the time and answering questions and everything like that. So how do you feel like community is important for you in terms of trading?
I think it's been hugely important. Even if I'm not asking a lot of questions, sort of like seeing people succeed at what I'm trying to do and just, the excitement and the energy. I think it's really, really helpful because, when you're losing, for example, 30 trades in the row, like mentally you're destroyed,
Right.
but like having people kind of build you up and say, keep your head up, keep your losses small, just keep fighting. That's been hugely important, and I feel like I really benefited from that. So now whenever I see people that have come in after me, anything that I can pass along to help, I try to, whether it's in the chats, or a lot of people have been sending me private messages, and I try to respond and really give them thoughtful answers. um, because I feel like it's really, really helpful, and it's really encouraging. And also I learn a lot, like I said, having to answer these questions and give people information, it really makes me kind of reflect on what I'm doing and whether I should be doing something differently. So it's not just beneficial for them, it's also beneficial for me.
And that's also always what I tell people, and traders specifically, is to be honest, even for me, right? Like when I started the accelerator, for example, I used to trade a little bit differently, where I'd take some feeler positions, and I trade some, like, little small things just to see how the market is. But now whenever I trade, it's like one done, like that's all I'm doing. I'm taking that one hit and I'm gone, for that one trade. And I think that's been really helpful because, I, for example, have 700, 800 people listening to me every single day, exactly where I'm entering, exactly where I'm exiting. And so it can be a little bit mentally, in the beginning at least, it was a little bit mentally, like, as if I lost a trade, it would be mentally frustrating, right? Because it'd be like, damn, like I wouldn't even care. For me, for example, I didn't care that I lost a trade because I knew I was going to come back. But I was like, damn, like, 800 people listened to that loss or whatever, and they may have taken that, and that kind of sucks. But the more you kind of teach those people, the more you kind of refine your systems, because you're consistently saying the things that work, because you're trying to teach other people, it kind of sticks in your head more. And I mean, we can see, like, even for now, like, I'm a lot more selective. Even you, for example, you're a lot more selective. So it's one of those things where I think teaching can actually genuinely help you become on that next level of trader, because you have to keep saying the things that work to other people. But then, sometimes we're obviously human, so even I make mistakes, you make mistakes as well, right? So but it's like, why you made it, and you're like, damn, like if someone came with me with this question, I'd be like, yeah, why'd you do that? That makes no sense. But it's like, I just did it, right? So
100%. Yeah. Like if I look back at my trade, and I say, would I tell someone to do it this way? If
yeah.
the answer is no, then, I obviously didn't follow my system. I didn't do something right.
Yeah.
And yeah, just explaining things to other people, it really does sort of hold you accountable. And I can only imagine for you,
Hmm.
800 people watching you, and I'm sure a fair number of them copying your trade,
Yeah.
and you lose, and they all lose even more because they didn't enter as well as you did.
Yeah.
I'm sure for you that's much harder than actually losing the money, is like,
Hmm.
I didn't follow my system, or I made a mistake, and I steered these people in the wrong direction.
Yeah. No, exactly. Right. So that's a little bit more, but for at least January and February, it's been no December. Since December, it's just been consistently green. I think I was green for 2 months in a row. So that consistently green in front of that many people felt really good. But anyways, I think this was good. I think this was really insightful. I think that people can learn a lot from this as well in terms of the people that are already kind of there. They can kind of see how you refine your systems. You most likely will start getting a lot more DMs, by the way, once this is up. But so be ready for that. But yeah,
That's okay. I already get quite a few, and like I said, I'm working a lot right now, so it may take time to get back to people, but I will help out wherever I can. I'm happy to do that because
awesome.
I think that makes the community better for everybody.
Awesome. And that's exactly why, I don't know, I think within our community, there's a lot of people that do that in the back behind the scenes and stuff like that, which is actually really good. And that's why there's a lot of insight, I feel like, being shared, which I do have once again, another announcement later today for everyone in there. So look forward to that as well. But yeah, with that being said, this was fantastic. We got to learn a lot more about your system, a little bit more about your trading performance, what people can refine, and kind of the journey as well that you were on, kind of get to the level you are today, which is really good. So this was a good interview. Thank you for being on. I want to thank you for taking the time out of your day for coming on and kind of helping everyone else out in terms of a little bit more insight on your trading. So hopefully it can also help their trading as well. You got anything else to say in terms of leaving the viewer with one last word of wisdom?
Well, first, thank you for having me. I appreciate having the conversation, and I think it's really, when you look at what I've done, the timeline might be compressed, but the lessons and the mistakes and everything, you listen to mine, you listen to Neto's, you listen to everybody who has started having success. We're all in the same spot.
Yeah.
We enter poorly, we go green to red, we all make the same mistakes. We jump from strategy to strategy, even sometimes when we have something that works.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it's like just, you know, I think keeping track of your stats is huge. TradeZella's been huge for that, and figuring out what works for you, and then just kind of focusing in on that and managing risk is really the game. It
Mm-hmm.
sounds simple, but once it kind of sinks in, that's really what it is.
Well, that's the thing, right? I always say it's simple. It's not easy, right? Like
Yeah.
it honestly is simple. It's not easy though, because you have so much human emotions, nature, your own human nature, your own personality. So there's a lot of different factors, and then your own personal life as well, right? Whereas you had that kind of full-time job, so you were able to kind of put on that risk. And I think that's important as well. But yeah,
Right. Yeah, that's really the difference for me that has shortened my timeline is that, once I figured out, okay, this works for me, now I'm going to put more risk on it. And, that's really where my journey is different from anyone else's. But, I think it's possible for a lot of people if you just, you know, focus in on your strategy and stick to your rules and just, manage your risk.
yeah. Awesome. Cool. All right. Well, thanks for coming on, and hopefully we see even more progress soon.
Sounds great. Thank you.